Good evening and welcome to Money Matters. My name is Charlie Huntington and I am Public Relations Chairperson for Life Sciences PA. Life Sciences PA is the voice of advancement for PA's bioscience, medical device, CRO, and healthcare IT industries. Tonight we continue our special series on science leaders in our local community, but I'd like to remind you first of all that from time to time, financial issues relating to life sciences, healthcare, or technology matters or companies may be discussed on the show. These discussions are not and should not be viewed as financial advice. Moreover, since this program is pre-recorded and shown at a later date, please keep in mind that the information may no longer be current. You should always check with your financial advisor before entering into any financial transaction. I'm pleased to have with me as my co-host Kimon Hataz. Kimon is a business attorney and partner at GrowthCounsel LLC in Philadelphia. His focus is on the life sciences, healthcare, and information technology areas. Welcome, Kimon.
Thanks, Charlie. Happy to be here.
Kimon, would you tell our viewers what's new with your very busy practice since our last show, please?
Sure. Thank you, Charlie, for the opportunity. Not much has changed since we were last together. We have been at or near capacity probably for 15 or 16 months now, I think just before the pandemic got into full swing. And we've done a lot of that work remotely, only now coming back to the office a little bit more regularly. You know that we are solely a business transactional firm, and the activity has been primarily in mergers and acquisitions and financing transactions. And interestingly, it's been involving companies across industries. It's not just life sciences, it's not just software or information technology, although all the companies that we represent tend to have some sort of a technology component. But the industries we've been working in, healthcare, software, marketing, real estate, data analysis, it's been a lot of different industries. Even our outside counsel services, we provide outside general counsel services to companies that aren't big enough to have their own in-house legal staff, and that's been full tilt. So knock on wood, it's going to continue, but that's basically been what's been going on.
Thanks, Kimon. Well, as you know, we have a very busy show tonight, and before we bring that to you, I want to remind our viewers, here's how you can get your question answered on a future episode.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
It's with great pleasure that I introduce Eric Corkhill. Eric is CEO of NeuroAlert Technologies, LLC, which specializes in the alerting of stroke symptoms in hospitalized patients. NeuroAlert is Eric's 7th startup. Past startups have included Prescription Advisory Systems and Technology, Notify Health, which was acquired by IWT Health, Centillion, which was acquired by Microsoft, and A-Life Medical, which was acquired by what is now Optum. Eric is a committee head at Devon Horse Show and is a past board member at Radnor Hunt. Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, Charlie. Good evening. Great to see you, and thank you for letting me be on the show.
How did your background prepare you to be CEO of NeuroAlert Technologies, Eric?
Well, I have been in the digital health industry for over 40 years, and I focused, quite frankly, Charlie, throughout that time on clinical applications that improved decision-making or improved how care quality could be delivered. So along comes NeuroAlert, and as you mentioned, I've done a number of startups before, love the company, and wanted to go at bat again. So that's how I ended up here.
It's a great story. Well, tell us about NeuroAlert, and please describe your technology to our viewers.
Sure. So we're a medical device company that is able to detect strokes literally 5 times faster than the current standard of care. And we do that, and the innovation part is we use lightweight, non-invasive bands that we place on the wrists of patients. And these bands monitor the arm movement of the patient, specifically asymmetry of arm movement, which is a classic indication of a stroke. And these bands transmit their telemetry to a patented algorithm that is evaluating the data, looking for stroke signs. But what it also does is it is able to mathematically model out a lot of other things that cause asymmetry. Hand dominance, talking on the cell phone, eating, an IV line, these all cause asymmetry, but none of them have anything to do with stroke. So it models out those things that aren't stroke related, looks for things that are, and when it finds that there's a stroke, it immediately sends an alert to the hospital staff so they can more quickly assess the patient and deliver effective treatments.
Why is it so important to identify those who suffer stroke sooner than later?
Well, you know, in the neurological world, they say that time is brain. In a severe stroke, you actually lose 2 million neurons every minute. So it really is time is brain. And we're focusing initially on hospitals because, believe it or not, 10% of all strokes happen to patients that are in the hospital for other medical reasons, such as a joint replacement or a stent insertion. And unfortunately, the majority of these strokes aren't detected for hours. And unfortunately, late stroke detection means that the hospitals can't utilize proven life-saving or stroke mitigating treatments, which significantly increases their cost, litigation. So we're hoping to be able to really decrease the detection time so we can generate much better outcomes.
Thank you.
NeuroAlert has an exclusive license to certain intellectual property that was developed by your founders at the University of Pennsylvania. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about that?
Yeah, Kimon, I mean, the secret sauce really is the algorithm because, as I said before, it mathematically models out all these things that cause asymmetry. And we're not the first ones to try to use asymmetry to detect strokes. But previous companies, previous efforts have failed because of a very high false alarm because of those other confounding factors. So the real IP is this algorithm. And yes, as you mentioned, it was developed at the University of Pennsylvania. The 2 co-founders are still employed there. We have a very tight relationship. We have an exclusive license rights to this IP. And actually, it has already been patented once in a different use case, and a provisional patent has been filed for the use case of stroke detection.
Okay. You had mentioned when we first met that you are only in hospitals presently. Can you talk a little bit about that and also the potential markets for NeuroAlert outside of the hospital setting?
Yeah, we're starting with acute care hospitals, Kim, and actually specifically Joint Commission accredited stroke care centers. And the reason we're focusing there is that they're the ones that deal with this problem constantly, and they're most sympathetic and aware of the problem of in-hospital strokes. But once we have established NeuroAlert as a post-operative stroke monitoring system, then we're going to expand within the acute care environment to protect anybody that is admitted with an elevated risk of stroke. People that have had a stroke, people that have diabetes, congestive heart failures, AFib. So billions of people are admitted each year with an elevated risk of stroke. But beyond the acute care marketplace, nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities, and there's actually even a very, very promising play for the consumer health because we designed the bands to be compatible with existing wearable health monitors like Google Fitbit or Apple Watch. And being able to have the same degree of stroke detection ability in your home, in your office, as you would in the hospital, will appeal to the 50 million people that live every single day in fear of stroke because they have comorbid conditions that dramatically increase the risk of stroke.
Wow. One of the issues many of our startup companies have, who we've spoken with on the show, is funding, particularly in the life sciences space, with the need often for multiple clinical trials and so forth. That funding has to continue sometimes for 7 to 10 years. Talk a little bit about how you're funded and whether you will need to get some more funding down the road.
Yeah, so we've been very bootstrapping to date. Funding has come through accelerator programs, grants. Ben Franklin has been very helpful, but we're actually in the process of raising $1.5 million through a convertible note. And really, what that convertible note, that 1.5, gets us is a couple things. We're in the process of building purpose-built wristbands because there's nothing on the market that is either FDA approved or meets our specific requirements. But the 1.5 also gets us through 2 different gates with the FDA. We have already applied to the FDA for breakthrough technology designation. We should hear the results of that by August. But the 1.5 also should get us through to the process of being approved as a Class 2 de novo device. Class 2 de novo because there are no predicates to what we're doing, so we're brand new. And then as soon as we have FDA approval, I'll be raising another round to effectively commercialize the company, manufacture bands, hire staff, and start targeting that subset of acute care hospitals that I mentioned previously.
Eric, I've got a question for you. If we hear stories about hundreds of thousands, it seems like, of pickup trucks waiting for chips. We hear Chick-fil-A looking for sauce. If you were in full-scale manufacturing mode, would resources be limited right now with these bans, or you don't think so?
No, actually, so the IP is really in the algorithm, not so much the bands. The bands are using, quite frankly, off-the-shelf component parts, accelerometer, a chip, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. So these are not really expensive to make. We already have contracted with a local design and manufacturing firm that's ISO certified. But yeah, at scale, we may be looking at larger production plants and overseas operations as well.
Very good. So would you contrast the Philadelphia region to others maybe with a similar focus, like San Francisco, San Diego, Boston, or Research Triangle Park, in terms of a place to do business, please?
Yeah, Charlie, I was born and raised here in Philadelphia. Most of my professional career has been in Philadelphia, but a number of my companies, my startups, have been all over the country, West Coast, Northeast, et cetera. Not to be too generalized about it, but the Philadelphia area is more fiscally conservative. I mean, we are the Quaker state, after all. And many institutional investors are looking for what they would call traction. Traction being defined as revenue, clients, getting FDA approval, and other organizations on the West Coast, as you mentioned, Northeast, they are more likely or more agreeable to funding prototypes or even just an idea.
Makes sense. You might have to trade out the what the horses do as well. I've seen a lot of polo played on the West Coast. So let's see. So what would success look like 5 years from now for you and for NeuroAlert?
Well, as a CEO and as a company, I think we're looking at $25 to $30 million of revenue. And, knock on wood, would be juggling multiple acquisition opportunities. But I have to tell you, the co-founder, Dr. Messe, and I think as a company, we're very mission-driven. And, in 5 years, I'd love to see a NeuroAlert band on patients in every hospital, every nursing home. And for the consumer that is fearful of a stroke and having a life that is wheelchair bound or requires constant rehab. I want bans on them. So that's what success would look like for us.
Thanks, Eric.
Eric, one quick question, just to follow up on something that we had spoken about a few minutes ago. What is the benefit of being classified as a breakthrough technology by the FDA?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kimon. First of all, it's a relatively new program for the FDA, and it's designated for technologies that fit a certain clinical need and are truly extraordinary or unique in the value that they bring. In fact, if you read through the literature, stroke is actually mentioned as one of the disease states that would be applicable for breakthrough. But with breakthrough, a couple things happen. First of all, you end up getting a much more iterative process of going through your FDA application process for de novo. And rather than sending materials in, waiting several months, getting responses, you literally have almost weekly calls with the FDA. So I think better communication will result in a better decision. The second thing it does is that CMS, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare, actually will automatically assign reimbursement funding via modification of existing codes. So our value proposition right now is based upon cost avoidance, reduction of length of stay, reduction of the risk of litigation. But if we can get breakthrough technology and if the CMS reimburses us, then it actually becomes a revenue generator for the hospitals that utilize the product.
It's interesting. Eric, are my chances today, without the availability of this technology, are my chances of surviving a stroke, would they be, better in an urban area with a lot of hospitals around like we have here in the Philadelphia region, as opposed to somewhere in a rural area where the proximity of healthcare is not as close?
Well, so there's a two-part response to that. With a serious stroke that's going to require a thrombectomy, you really need to go to an accredited medical center where you have a neurologist on staff that can perform that procedure. But let me talk to you about the whole issue of stroke probability. It's actually counterintuitive, but strokes that occur in the hospital tend to be more severe than strokes that occur in the community and tend to have worse outcomes. And the reason being, if you had a stroke and we were sitting across the table, I would start seeing physical signs, face drooping, speech slurring. Think about a hospital patient. They're lying in a bed. They're many times sedated, intubated, have a mask on. So many of those visual clues are not so evident. And in fact, stroke detection in hospitals is a completely manual process. And it's really dependent upon very timely, consistent neurological checks being done by the clinical staff in order to detect that stroke. And unfortunately, as we all know, staffing is just very hectic. And unfortunately, many of these strokes are just not detected in a timely manner.
That's an interesting fact and a really good sales point, I think, for your product. Middle of the night, one nurse on, covering a bunch of beds. That is counterintuitive, but very, very interesting and very telling. I have a question for you that we frequently ask as sort of like a broader question regarding the region, but you've suggested, and I think you're right, I would really like to personalize this question this time. What advice, since you have been a serial entrepreneur, I would really be interested, and I'm sure our viewers would, in knowing what advice that you would have for entrepreneurs who are interested in commercializing a technology with which they are familiar.
It's not for the faint of heart. 90% of all startups fail. But if I had to distill it down, the things that I think that have helped me, helped other people that I've seen that have been successful startups, you really just can't give up. You have to give it your all. Whatever you thought was what your product or your market or your price was going to look like, it's going to be different. So get comfortable with the fact that it's not going to follow the original path that you thought, which means that you have to pivot. And you just have to have intestinal fortitude. It's there's more down days than there are up, but the up days are absolutely wonderful, which is kind of why I've been doing it for the last 25 years.
So having seen this 7 times previously, I'm sure you've run into many of the things that you've just alluded to, some of the things that just come up that you're not anticipating. And I was wondering if you could tell us some of the biggest challenges that CEOs of technology startups might face.
Well, again, I think you really have to have flexibility, mental flexibility, that what you thought was going to be your product, your market, your price, your technology core, your partner, it's going to be different. You put together a business plan, you slave over it, you put your intellect into it, but you're going to have to be able to be flexible, move with the wind. You may have competitive challenges that you never anticipated. Somebody leapfrogs you with the technology. So you're going to have to find a different way to create a competitive value proposition. And listen, I have been doing it almost my entire life in the acute care health sector, which is just a very tough environment to go into anyway. And anybody that wants to go into acute care health, God bless you. Let's talk, because there's got to be something else you may want to consider.
I don't know that we've spoken about this before, but was your undergraduate background or your graduate background, if there was one, in the science area, so that you were a natural for the life sciences, or if not, how did you get there? Yeah.
Yeah, my dad was a physician at Bryn Mawr Hospital, OBGYN, chairman of the department for 20 years. And, like many children of physicians, you want to follow in their footsteps. And I was pre-med at UVA. And beginning my end of my second year, was having a conversation in the phone booth of the fraternity house with my dad, and had a long conversation. And he actually talked me out of being a doctor. He was concerned about socialized medicine, turned out to be managed care. But the whole idea of a third party telling a physician, how they can and cannot treat a patient was an anathema to him. So he said, listen, Eric, if I was in your shoes, I wouldn't be a doctor. And I immediately changed majors, ended up with a degree in marketing with a minor in art history and biology. So I'm great at cocktail parties.
Eric, as you consider scaling up and hiring and this type thing, as funding works out, where are you right now, and where are you seeing companies that you're close to in terms of bringing their workforce back, or in your case, ramping up and hiring people right now at the tail end of COVID? What do you think your approach will be?
Yeah, so I will not be hiring for NeuroAlert until we get FDA approval. But quite frankly, at that time, then I'm going to be heading out and finding 15, 20, 25 people all at once for sales, marketing, fulfillment, customer support, et cetera. I think what we're seeing, Charlie, is going to be a hybrid market for employment. My CTO, who actually runs his own software development company with 85 employees, it's like a 25, 50, 25. 25 never want to come back. 50 want to come back in a hybrid environment, and 25% want to come back full time. So I think that's going to be pretty indicative of what we see as the future labor environment.
Yeah, I know we're not headed back till September. Kimon, how about you and your clients? Have you all been in the office? Are you returning to the office? And what about your clients?
Mostly what we're doing now is still via these kinds of meetings in the past 15 months. We have all been in the office from time to time. 2 of my partners are in there now almost full time. And the other 3 of us now periodically. The building that we are in right now is still pretty empty. I think people are still, trying to figure it out whether they're going to be working remotely whether they're going to be working remotely, person-to-person business meeting next week in the past 15 months. So that's kind of where we are right now, Charlie.
So you and your partners are doing deals. Potentially, can we say that these companies that are doing deals with each other, maybe they have never met in person and it's all been virtual?
I think they've probably, it's a good question. I think most of the deals that I've worked on now, the people at least know each other in person before the deals have started. However, many of these folks have not seen each other, in the past year and a half.
Right.
So they've been doing everything remotely, and I guess thank God in some ways, because you know how issues come up in deals sometimes where you have to have a real heart-to-heart conversation time and again. Having
helps to have rapport, right?
Yeah, it does.
Helps to have rapport.
It helps to have that rapport and not just an online relationship.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time, but Eric, as we mentioned earlier, we know you're involved in horses, and that's one of your passions. We like to see what else is maybe interesting about our guests for our viewers. Where would we find you on a weekend? What do you like to do when you're not building companies?
I'm an avid golfer. I've been playing with the same foursome for, I think we're approaching 30 years together. So
Wow.
it's like playing with the Three Stooges. So it's fun. I'm an avid gardener. I also do a lot of hunting. So those are some of my my respites away from work. But being a serial entrepreneur, I've retired 3 times and keep on coming back. So it's certainly in my blood.
That's awesome. Well, you've been a great guest. Thank you for co-hosting, Kim. And I want to remind our viewers that Thad Bench, who's CEO of Benchworks, is going to be our guest on our next show. He helps to develop life science companies. I'm sure he'll have some great ideas for our viewers. And with that, again, I want to thank Eric. I want to thank Kimon, and good night to all our viewers.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Charlie.